Tokyo is a city of contrasts. By day, it's a relentless machine, pulsing with the rhythm of millions of indentured souls, crammed into trains, offices, and ebullient streets. But as the sun dips behind the skyline, the city undergoes a transformation. The flicker of neon lights, the scent of grilling yakitori bringing alleys to life as the rigid order of the day gives way to the chaos of the night. It's a place where ancient tradition and cutting-edge modernity converge, and somehow it all makes perfect sense. Tokyo is a city that never stops, but it's at night when its spirits truly comes alive. And I can't go there. Not yet, at least. But I've long been fascinated by the dichotomy of Japanese city life. Therefore, today I wanted to show you two cocktails that perfectly exemplify this. Completely different, and yet somehow one and the same. Japan is a place that seems almost unknowable to some people here in the West, despite the fact that there are many things culturally that they have imported from us and us from them. Their strong isolationist tendencies have really kept them at arm's length from the rest of the world for much of modern history. Ordering a cocktail at a nice bar in Tokyo is a wholly different affair from the likes of, say, London or New York, and it's an experience I've long wanted to have since before I even started bartending. Japanese bartenders differ from Western ones in that they approach it much more as an art form, keeping their practice rooted very heavily in precision, respect, and tradition, where you will find a lot of similarities between some of the best Japanese bartenders and the famous sushi masters.
Look at his posture, a fighter's stance. Distance, knowing the perfect spot to be. Moving in and out as needed, never out of position.
In such lines of profession in Japan, there is a strong emphasis on something they call shokunin, which loosely translates to the term artisan in English, although that does tend to lose some of the finer details of the meaning. Shokunin, more or less, is the craftsman's way, with the most meticulous attention to detail whilst turning raw materials into the most refined of finished products. Every step, from selecting the particular ice cubes they're going to shake with to pouring the drink, is done with the most precise intentionality. The deliberate pace allows the bartender to focus deliberately on each specific detail, ending up with a finished product that ought to be no less than perfect. This reflects the Japanese cultural values known as omotenashi, where the experience and comfort of the guest is absolutely paramount. Slow, graceful movements contrasted with often quick and precise ones highlights the aesthetics of the whole process, turning the act of making a drink into a performance. For the masterful Japanese bartender, it is every bit as much about the journey as it is the destination, turning the whole experience of having a drink into a moment of zen-like appreciation. In short, where Japanese bartenders view the ordering of a drink as an experience in and of itself, seeing it as an opportunity to display one's appreciation for their culture, tradition, and professionalism. In the West, the creation of a cocktail is simply what happens between placing an order and taking the first sip. As a result, cocktails in these Japanese bars are often incredibly simple, unadorned affairs, with the emphasis on the experience rather than top-shelf ingredients. Because why order a complex cocktail with expensive ingredients that's made okay, rather than a simple 3-ingredient cocktail that is made the best it is feasibly possible to make it? Now, needless to say, I am not as well trained as the bartending masters in these Japanese bars. However,
you don't say.
Here is a rough look at how the experience may appear in one of these Japanese bars as opposed to an experience in a more traditional Western style bar.
Who was it? He didn't say.
Of course, remembering the emphasis being on silence, precision, and quality. So let's make a daiquiri and see what that looks like. Kanpai. The focus in making that cocktail was being precise with my movements, being very precise with my ingredients. Getting the balance just right, knowing the strength of my simple syrup, the tartness of my limes, and the flavour of the white rum I was using. Choosing a glass that's the perfect shape, the perfect size, but not too overly adorned or complicated, distracting from the overall drink. Of course, the use of a cobbler shaker, or a Japanese shaker as they are also known, is very important for the overall look here, because it's rather uncommon for Japanese bartenders at least to use something like this, a Boston shaker. Let's try our daiquiri. Ooh, that is perfect. Not too sweet, not too sour, whilst also allowing the Cuban rum, the Havana 3-year-old, to perfectly stand out here. Havana Club 3 is certainly the best daiquiri rum that's easily commercially available in Scotland or even the UK, really. It's sweet. I almost think it's almost buttery, and of course rum being a sugarcane spirit, the flavour of the sugar can really help bring out a lot of those notes in the rum, which of course this does. And the bite of that, it is no wonder that the combination of sugar, rum and lime has been around pretty much as long as people have had access to all three at once. And that is why it's an approach that you very often see in a lot of these Japanese bars, because it is so simple and yet very easy to get wrong. And that's why a lot of bartenders say that ordering a daiquiri is almost like a type of litmus test for if a bar is worth going to and ordering cocktails at. And hopefully the way that this segment has been presented and edited can show you the kind of flair that these Japanese bartenders are certainly going for, a real emphasis on the whole aesthetic of the occasion, and just really getting to focus on the precise movements and the overall cleanliness of the bar space. Which is why ordering at one of these Japanese style bars does require a good bit of patience. You simply can't be going in there just to grab a drink. You must be going in there looking for the whole experience, otherwise it'll all be for naught. Damn, that's good. Anyway, that being said, these Japanese style bars have a lot more to show in terms of flavour, technique, and use of unconventional ingredients. The next cocktail we'll take a look at is almost the direct inverse of the one we have just seen, yet however, not remotely out of place. This next cocktail we're going to take a look at is by master bartender Hiroyasu Kayama, and I'm going to do this one as I normally tend to do, with a bit of explanation so that I can elaborate behind some of the processes going on here. Even just starting this cocktail is a little bit unconventional. We are going to start with 2 bowls. We are going to take an egg. This is my last egg. I really can't mess this up. We are going to want to separate the white from the yolk in this egg. Yolk in there. Now we are going to want to add to our yolk something called white bean paste. It's something called white bean paste. It just is what it is. This is often used in confectionery in Japan, a very, very common ingredient that you can pick up at pretty much any store there. Now, I'm going to add probably a couple of barspoons of white bean paste to my yolk. Keeping one's work surface clean is absolutely paramount on a lot of these Japanese style bars, and that includes having your bar spoon rinsed and just off to the side here, ready to go. We want to add about 1 bar spoon of matcha powder to our yolk and white bean paste mixture. Now, putting this off to the side, we are now going to whisk our egg white to a froth. This is where that element of patience is really, really going to come into play. This is thirsty work. Luckily I made a daiquiri earlier. Alright, that is just about done. Returning to our yolk, white bean paste and matcha mix, Master Hiroyasu Kayama's recipe now calls for about 1.5 to 2 ounces of a Japanese whiskey called Hakushu. Now, I could get some of this on Amazon, but it would cost me a lot of money. But Japanese whiskey, originally the distillation method was heavily based on, if not outright trying to copy, the methods of Scotch whiskey. So looking up the flavour profile for Hakushu, what it sounded incredibly similar to was, now I'm very proud about this, my locally distilled Benromach 10-year-old whiskey. It's a Speyside whiskey, but it's quite unique in that it has a good hint of sort of peat smoke, which isn't too common for Speyside whiskey. You normally find that in some of the Islay whiskies like Lagavulin. This stuff is 43% ABV, and Hakushu like Benromach 10, has a lot of fruity notes, a bit of vanilla, but also an underlying current of a good sort of unctuous umami smokiness all throughout. Making this one of my favourite whiskies. We will need 1.5 ounces of Hakushu whiskey, or like me, you can go for Benromach 10-year-old Scotch whiskey. I think this and Hakushu should be as widely available in the United States. Back to the whiskey shelf you go. We are now going to add the egg white, and I'm just going to very lightly whisk this. We are going to return to our trusty cobbler or Japanese shaker. Now in Japan, just sort of as a whole, the approach to the ice they use is very different from, I think, the rest of the world, in that it's much preferred to use high quality, crystal clear ice that has been hand chipped from a much larger block. That's obviously quite difficult to come by in this part of the world, so I made a bunch of clear ice myself. Into the cobbler shaker this goes. We're going to add our lovely, clear, high quality ice. Going to make sure we have a good seal and adopt a very specific and very precise shaking method. Now, Master Kayama, when I saw him make this cocktail on a video, used what looks like some large sake cups. However, I don't have large ones, I just have these small ones, as lovely as they may be. So we're just going to split this cocktail into these sake cups, just as many ways as is necessary. And there we have Master Hiroyasu Takama's egg drop cocktail. I'm very interested to try this. I have not yet tried this, and I'm curious because there is no acid, there's no citrus in this to offset a lot of the very rich flavours that we've got going on here. Been wanting to try this for a while, this is my first time. Kanpai. Ooh, that is unlike anything I have ever had before. First off, the flavour is deep and it is unctuous. Right up front you get that. Right up front you get the...
Well, we're waiting.
You get the body and the richness of that white bean paste. It is rich, it is decadent, it is sweet, but it's not overpowering, because playing into the flavour of that rich deepness heavily is the whiskey we've got going here. The Benromach 10 was perfect for this. The body and the sweet smoke in there has just bolstered up all of the good savoury flavours in that white bean paste. You don't miss the lack of acid in here at all. And after that smoke subsides, it doesn't disappear, but instead it begins to mingle with the herbal grassy notes of that matcha powder. And as more air goes through my mouth, the grassy notes intensify more and more, and they intermingle with the vegetal taste of the white bean paste and the subtle body and smoke of that Benromach whiskey. What the egg is doing here is it's providing a lot of the unctuousness, a lot of the richness, a lot of the body. It's not interacting with the flavour in any way, but the white is providing all of the texture we've got going on here, because the cocktail is fluffy and it is light, which is why we wanted to whip it beforehand, because there's no acid to emulsify it. So we gave it volume, we gave it texture by hand before adding it to the cocktail to shake, because that yolk has added an almost baking, an almost bready texture to this. That is a cocktail experience very unlike anything I have had before. In a word, this is unique. This is a cocktail that perfectly exemplifies the absolute dichotomy, I think, of Tokyo and at large Japanese city life. There are so many bold contrasts going on here that shouldn't work in any measurable sense, and yet they absolutely do. Everything harmonizes in this cocktail in exactly the way you can only hope that it would. There we have it, two cocktails, although I have already drunk one of them, that I think perfectly exemplify this dichotomy, this contrast contradiction almost of Japanese city life. It shouldn't work, but it does. I hope you enjoyed this experience, this journey, every bit as much as I enjoyed delivering it. Hopefully I've opened your eyes a bit, encouraged you to stay curious as I tend to try to do. I can't wait to learn more, and hopefully you feel the same way. So, if that's the case, stick around because I've got a lot more to show you. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time. Cheers.